Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This week on the Sweetwater Minute, we have the honor of being joined by Adrian Belew.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate you being here.
Great to be here.
This is your second time here at Sweetwater.
Yeah, I love it.
It's
such a great facility, and the people here work really hard, and you can get just about anything that can be had right here.
Pretty close, that's right.
And it's clean as a whistle.
That's right. We like things to be spick and span. So you're here for a clinic for Parker guitars tonight, and we're going to talk about the guitar that you're holding in a little bit. But this morning you were also doing you were performing and answering questions for the sales engineers in our meeting.
At 7:30 in the morning.
Bright and early.
Yeah, bright and early, and it was fun.
Oh, it was great.
And I mean, I was in gear. I was ready to go, and the salespeople, they're always great too.
Right.
So we try to get them excited so they get out there and start selling those Parker guitars.
That's right, exactly. So there were a lot of great questions that came from the sales engineers, and they kind of got me thinking about some different things. And one of the things you were talking about was how your career has kind of progressed from meeting different people. And from the outside, it kind of looks like, to me, like, well, I met Frank Zappa, and then I met David Bowie, and the career just kind of took off, and it was very easy. And is that the way that it really went down, or how was that?
Yeah, kind of like that. It was very serendipitous, especially at the beginning of the 80s. As you mentioned, at first I got in Frank's band, and I never planned to be a sideman in Frank's band ever.
Right.
And then we went to Europe, and Brian Eno heard me, turned David Bowie on to me. We met David Bowie. Then I became his guitarist. Mm-hmm. And from there, Talking Heads heard us play at Madison Square Gardens, and they asked me in their band, and that turned into the Tom Tom Club. And then eventually Robert Fripp showed up with this idea that we should start a new King Crimson. It was kind of a little circle, especially in the New York City area, of people like Laurie Anderson and David Byrne and Robert Fripp and Peter Gabriel, and just all the innovative artists seemed to be in this one little circle that I somehow landed in. Right in the middle of, and so before I knew it, I was playing on everybody's records.
Right, so it was kind of those connections.
It's not the way I planned it, of course. You know, it was the backdoor entrance to having your own solo career.
Right, yeah, right. So you started out, you're from Kentucky.
That's
and
right.
You had a band called the Denims.
I did, and in that band I was the drummer, not the guitarist.
Okay.
I hadn't learned to play guitar yet.
And sort of a Beatles kind of a vibe.
It was
to that
totally
band?
a Beatles band. It was at that era, and we were kind of known as Cincinnati's Beatles. Mm-hmm. And we dressed in the Beatles suits and stuff. And my drum kit had the Beatle drum head with the denims on it. It was so much fun.
Right.
I loved that experience, and we were very popular, and that's what we did. But what happened is really, as that band was folding, I was starting to get all these ideas about songs and things. And as a drummer, I couldn't explain them to anyone. Mm-hmm. So I just I got sick in my junior year of high school, age 16, and they said, you're going to have to stay at home. I had mononucleosis. You're going to have to stay at home for 2 months now and be inactive. You can't play drums. You just sit around. So I thought, gee, what am I going to do? So I borrowed an acoustic guitar, and I taught myself to play. Mm-hmm. And I would just figure out, well, this is the note that I want to hear. Now, what would be a harmony? Here's the harmony note I want to hear. So how would you put your fingers there?
Right.
So consequently, when I came back to the Denims and showed them the songs I'd been writing, the chords were something like that, And what's that one? Well, that's a G demolished, Right. Because I really didn't know what I was doing. But
right.
It worked out.
So right from the beginning, your ear was kind of leading you to those more creative kind of textures and chords and harmonizations and things?
I've always had a natural talent for being able to hear harmonies and things. Some people, they'll hear a record and they only can sing along with the lead. Mm-hmm. I always could figure out what the bottom part was on an Everly Brothers record or something, the oddball things. They just naturally came to me. So, yeah, I guess it's a talent in that way. And then, of course, you just work. Anything that I liked, I figured it out on guitar. Anything, whether it was a Chet Atkins song or a Segovia thing, I would try. Not that I could do it, but
right.
And of course, there were the Beatles as inspiration, and then there came the whole series of virtuoso guitar players that really lit a fire under me. Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page. Mm-hmm. And music seemed to take on kind of all of a sudden now guitar was the serious instrument, so I made the switch. Right.
Now you sound nothing like Clapton or Beck or Hendrix or those guys. What led you to develop your own personal style from listening to those inspirations?
Well, I worked for a number of years in different bands and mostly in cover bands, and you were supposed to try to sound like this or sound like that, and I was able to do pretty good imitations of a lot of different types of guitar players. And then one day I realized, well, gee, I can do this, the same lick that he played, but what's the point? So I tried to make a habit of consciously thinking of trying something different whenever I would go for one of the stock Jimi Hendrix riffs or something. And the first thing that happened is I realized that I liked making the guitar do funny sounds and things. I could do a car horn, or seagulls, you know. And so I'd just be playing a solo, and I'd put that stuff in the solo, and the people in the audience would get a big kick out of it, you know. And I thought, well, that's interesting, you know. That's something no one else is doing, looking at the guitar as more of a sound controller than, you know, what notes and what licks you play.
Right.
And I just started down that path, and about the time that Frank got me into his band, I was starting to get somewhere with it. And by the time I got in David's band, where I was the lead guitar player and they required a lot of soloing, I had taken it to another place. I could do some things that no one else seemed to be doing.
Right, right. That kind of takes us back to that first question about how your career progresses. And actually, I ran into someone in the hallway after your performance this morning, and they said, you know, Adrian just makes me want to quit playing guitar. And, you know, I think it's interesting, though, when, you know, talking to you, obviously you put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
It's not like you just grabbed the guitar and stepped on stage
Forever
with
and
Frank
ever.
Zappa.
It's been my passion all my life.
Right.
But I will say this, okay? Before I played guitar, I actually went and heard Jimi Hendrix play.
Yeah.
I saw him one time. And if there's anybody who's going to make you want to quit playing guitar, it was probably him. And it didn't have that effect on me. It made me want to play guitar.
Right.
So I think there's different ways you can approach it. But the idea really is to find your own voice and your own things that you like, and combine things that you like and synthesize them together in something that you can maybe call your own. And you can't do that very quickly. It takes years.
Right, right. It also takes something else that you were talking about, which is extreme focus. And you were talking about how focused you have to be on your own music, and how Frank Zappa kind of led you to that realization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, watching Frank create his music and watching his daily life, which I did for a whole year. I stayed at his house most weekends for about 3 months, I mean. I noticed that he really never listened to any other music. He always was making music, busy creating it, writing it, teaching it, showing people. And I just thought, well, you know, maybe that's a good way to go, because I'm a pretty good mimic, and if I listen to too many other things, it starts getting into my head and starts to affect the purity of my ideas.
Right.
So the question was this morning, who else do I listen to and what records? And I hate to say this, but I just don't really listen to much other music because I don't have the time. I'm always working towards some new idea or some new piece of music I'm writing, or experimenting with new pedals, new sounds.
Sure.
And I just find that it's better for me personally not to listen to a lot of other things. So if I do have some recreational listening time, I kind of go back to something I know and love, you know, maybe some classical music or Beatle music or something like that. And I hate to say that because I know there's a lot of new players out there who will think, you know, well, that's very kind of sounds selfish, but it's the only way that I found that I can keep focused.
Yeah, I don't see it as selfish. I see it as being very focused on your own creative projects and your own endeavors.
There's a lot going on, and it's a full-time job. I'm busier now probably than ever.
Which is great.
Yeah, it's very
good for you.
great. A lot of good things coming up in the future that I'm really excited about.
Right, right. It was interesting watching you play, and it always is interesting watching you play, of course, in a number of different ways, but what's always intrigued me is how spontaneous your compositions sound, whether you're playing with a power trio, or you're doing a one-man show, whether you're with a larger group. Even within a structured framework, your playing seems very spontaneous. Is everything improvised, or are you doing things that are mostly composed, or how do you approach that?
It's definitely a combination of both. They have to be composed. The pieces I was playing today are brand new guitar pieces, and you want them to sound the same generally. You know, you want the composition to speak. But at the same time, I always like to leave some room in there, you know, some freedom to put something in there that you didn't do the last time, and change it around a little bit here and there, you know, improvise some things. So what I do generally is I have a composition, and I allow spots in the composition where I know that I can do something different every time.
Okay.
I never play solos the same twice, for example. I don't try to emulate what I've done on the record or someone else. And I feel it's very important that you have that kind of freedom, because that's how you stay fresh and sound fresh then to the audience. With the power trio, for example, we play the same set every night, but it sounds different every night because we've got those spots in there where we're going to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
it
it keeps us
fresh.
happy too.
Yeah, and exciting. Yeah, yeah. How much does the gear that you use inform that? How much I hate to say it's a partnership, but how much of a give and take is there between the gear that you're using and you're composing and you're improvising?
Super important is the gear, and it always has been. I've always been inspired by the technology. I've always been inspired by finding some new technique or some new sound or some new device that leads me into some place that I've not heard someone else do.
Right.
And that leads me to writing something to do with that. My compositional skills or whatever are greatly tied to whatever gear I have. You know, and I find something new that I couldn't do 2 years ago.
Right.
And it inspires me, you know. There are other things that inspire me. As a songwriter, of course, you get inspiration from the human element, of course. But musically, I find it really fascinating, all the stuff you can do. There seems to be no end to me what you can do with an electric guitar.
Right, right.
It's fascinating.
It is the gear, but it must also be the sound. I mean, it's not so much that this is a flanger, it's the sound that flanger is giving you.
It certainly has nothing to do with any particular brand or product or anything like that. It's absolutely what can you get out of this sound-wise. And I've tried all my life to build kind of a large vocabulary of sounds and things that I can rely on when I need them. You know, it started way back with elephants and rhinos, and now it's developed into whatever it is now. You know, orchestras.
Right. Now you over the years have also constantly changed and evolved your rig. The last time you were here, you were surrounded by pedals, and I think you had 4 guitar amplifiers, and you had a massive equipment with you, and you've really streamlined your rig down. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're approaching your rig these days?
Well, the thing is, I like to change my gear periodically every 4 or 5 years to inspire new things and to break my habits that I might have. But the real reason we've been downsizing this is just practicality of touring around the world. As the Power Trio became more and more of an international act, I realized you can't take all that stuff with you. And it really bothered me to go to, say, all the way to Russia and only be able to play about a quarter of the things that I like to do. So I made a big effort in the last 2 years since I've been here to figure out how to do the most I can possibly do of what I do with the least amount of gear. And it led me to, first of all, starting to play through a computer, which I'm not the best at computers. Anyone will tell you that who knows me. But it's not yet another fantastic tool, you know, you can do so much with. And it allows me to do so many things with that one little piece of gear, you know. We were able to downsize this and get it smaller and smaller, and I think it'll even get smaller over time too. And the cool thing is it's put a lot of work into it, and there's pretty much anything I could do before I can still do now. So it's not like I left a lot in the past from that. Sometimes when you change gear, you can't do what you were doing with the last gear, and that's very unfortunate. But I've figured out how to do most of the things that I can always do, and a whole lot new stuff.
And I was going to actually ask you about that because you're using a flanger from the 70s for this song and something from the 80s for this song and something from the 90s. Are you able to go back and recreate the sounds that you need to, or some of those you just have to let them go?
Very few of them I've had to let go. There's just a few things that I can't get out of the gear that I use now. Mostly, it's painstaking. You have to sit and really A/B back and forth. What is causing this to do this, and what is making it sound like that, and what are the qualities of this sound, and so on. In a way, it's a little bit of a science, and I seem to have a real good ear for it. So, and I don't mind doing it. I enjoy taking that time, you know. And I have good people working with me who can help me out. And, you know, if I get stuck somewhere and something, all the manufacturers over the years have been so nice to me. They've always kind of, you know, wanted me to use their gear and see what I can get out of it. And that's, I think, been very, very helpful for me.
And it's great for them too, because obviously you're pushing the limits of what their gear can do.
I try to, you know, I try to take it and do something with it. You know, my idea with a box or any box is get as much stuff out of that one box as you can, and hopefully try to make it something that not everyone is doing. And you can't have it all. I mean, there's so much incredible new gear. You have to pick and choose, and you have to sort of take your stand. Okay, I'm going to use this now, and I'm going to get the most I can out of it. And then no sooner than you've done that, there'll be a new thing that outdated that. But that's okay, because you get what you have. You get what you can out of what you have. You know, it's very important to spend a lot of time with it.
So you've got a laptop, Mac laptop. You're running Ableton Live software. You've got a looping plugin inside that, and a VG99, and a few guitar processors. You have a Mo2 interface. So it's really a compact rig. What was interesting to me, though, was watching you really control the whole show with your feet. How much rehearsal is required to get that smooth and to have that not be intrusive to your creative process?
I feel I'm part ballet dancer, actually, as I play. You have to get it to be second nature, especially if you're a singer and you're standing up and you want to be connected to the audience and you want to look at them. You don't want to be looking down at your pedals.
Right.
So, yeah, it does take a little familiarity. You've just practiced these things. We've got it set up now with this particular MIDI device, the Liquid Foot, that we can, call up any kind of programs I've got written, and it can switch to VG99 and everything in the computer. And so it's not that difficult to put it in the order that you want, knowing what you're doing. I have 4 different pedals that operate, the volumes and the expressions that you can use with all this different gear. But it's really actually it's a very small rig.
It's much more streamlined than we've seen you with in the past.
And the backline stuff, the speakers and the things that we use, I only use those in the States where we can drive them around. If I'm going to, say, Lithuania, they're just going to provide, something for me that I require. And I usually try to make it a pretty generic requirement, Pretty much everywhere they've got Fender amps and Marshall amps.
Right. You know what to expect with those.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have a preset set up for your rig here, you've got your 4 different expression control pedals. Do you keep those all mapped to the same thing so that it's consistent, or do you have them set up so that this one changes to this in a particular song and this one does this in a particular song, or how do you manage that?
A little bit of both, actually. This volume pedal goes for the VG99. It's the master volume for that. This one is the master volume for anything that I'm using in the computer. Say I have a piano sample or something. Okay. The one over here, that first one, is the master volume for all the guitar stuff. Okay. And the one next to it is the one that changes a lot. It's an expression pedal that can be applied to any of those other things. So every program that I have, it may be doing something entirely different.
Right, but it's just the one pedal. So
but
it's
just that one pedal, because you can assign when you're using a MIDI board like this, you can assign that parameter, that pedal to the piano sound that you've got over here even. So I don't want to have more than one, because then it gets too confusing.
It's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, but every patch may have a different set of values and things that you do with it. But you know, of course, exactly what it's going to do and what you're supposed to get out of it. Right.
So as many options as you have in the electronic part of your rig, you have a tremendous amount of options available in this guitar. Why don't you tell us what you have going on here?
Well, this to me is the most state-of-the-art guitar that I could imagine at this point. That was the idea of it. Ken Parker had already designed the Parker Fly, and for me, it is the perfect guitar. It stays perfectly in tune. It weighs 4 pounds. It plays like no other guitar. It makes me play better. What else can I say? That's kind of the best thing. And the minute I picked up a Parker Fly, I said, man, I just play better when I'm smoother and faster and everything. Has a lot of advantages. The guitar itself, before we even made it my own signature model, the tremolo is unlike anything. It doesn't use a spring system. It uses a bar that flexes like this, and it really, I can pull it up and down. And as I say, it stays in tune. And that to me is absolutely amazing, because I went through years and years of having to tune so often every time I would abuse the tremolo, because I do a lot of tremolo work. It has locking keys and so forth. It has stainless steel frets. You never have to replace them. There's never any intonation problems. So what I actually changed about the original Ken Parker design was just electronics. Okay. Because his design was made by somewhere in the 80s. And we wanted to do what you can do now. So what you could do now that I required was, first of all, to make it a MIDI guitar. Something that Ken Parker told me they had all along wanted to do, but they just decided at the last minute, no, that's just too much. So they did it. And so now this is MIDI. I can play this through keyboards or synthesizers or a computer. Sure. Secondly, it has a sustaining pickup here. That's something that's not been around forever. So sustainer is, if you lift up this middle knob here, it activates the sustainer, turns it from being this pickup into being, full sustain. And that will sustain a note forever until the battery runs dry.
Right.
And I love that because that's become a big part of my playing, so that I don't have to make the amp feedback. I can control it, and even at a low volume. The big part of my playing. Then finally, just about the time that we were about to put this guitar out, the Line 6 invented the Variax,
Right.
which is a modeling system for 25 different types of guitars. And that's what this knob is here. Once again, you activate it, you push it down, and all of a sudden you've got access to the sound of Les Pauls, Telecasters, Stratocasters, Rickenbacker 12 strings, acoustic guitars, choral electric sitar, banjo, and so forth. Very handy.
Yeah.
It's just like having a truckload of guitars in one little knob.
Right.
And those are the three things that I changed. And then my other thought was I wanted to keep it very uncluttered because it's such a modern, sculpted looking piece of instrument. I wanted to so we made it so that there was only 3 knobs, actually less knobs than you have on a regular Parker Fly. And we kept it really nice and clean, and we put 12-stage custom car finishes on. They're
Nice.
very interesting. So when you move the guitar, you catch light really differently, and it's beautiful.
Right.
And I was told that when they paint these guitars, and it's just obviously just a piece of wood, they put them in a spinner and it spins them dry. So the finish is just gorgeous.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the look of them.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. So this is the Adrian Belew signature Parker Fly.
Yes, this is it, and we have a second one now.
And what's the different with that one?
Well, it's a slightly different body style, the one they call the Dragonfly, which is a little more conventional looking, a little more like a more Strat-like.
Okay.
And we've left off the Variax. The idea was to make it something that's a more affordable, but still has most of the bells and whistles of this guitar. It still has the sustainer. It's still a MIDI guitar. It still has the piezo. It still has all the magnetic pickup abilities, the locking tuning keys, everything else. It's just, it's less expensive. So
Right.
for someone to get into a Parker Fly that has so much, it's a great deal, and it's just coming out now. I'm very excited about it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I have one more question for you. Actually, I have a couple questions for you, but my next question is, you recently were able to record with an orchestra, one of your pieces, E, and it's out on CD and DVD. Can you tell us about that experience?
Oh, what an experience that was. One of my crowning achievements of my career, and I've done so many things, but I will always remember it as just a remarkable experience. There's nothing quite like standing in front of a full orchestra and playing your music. It's an honor that few people get to have. I took 3 years to write the piece of music called E while I was touring and doing other things. And the whole time I was writing it for my power trio, I was often envisioning it as an orchestral piece. I kept hearing other parts and things and thought, well, someday maybe it would be nice to see if that could ever be done, but it didn't seem very possible. It's a tall order. I mentioned it on my blog, and lo and behold, I got a call from the Metropole Orchestra in Amsterdam, and they said, we're funded and we can do your piece of music, and we're big fans and we want to do your piece of music. So I was told to do that one piece of music. We only played it once live. It cost $250,000.
Wow.
So you can have it now for $25.
That's a good deal. That's a bargain.
on DVD. We also made a studio recording of it. And I have to say, it was such a great, powerful experience, and I believe that we set a new place for what you can do with an orchestra. It's rocking, it's powerful, it's complex, it's a lot of things that I associate with King Crimson and maybe Frank Zappa as well, in terms of what you can do orchestrally.
Right.
So I'm really, really proud of it. I hope someday to do it here.
That'd be great.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, congratulations on that. That's a
it
tremendous
was
achievement.
such fun, man. We spent a whole month in Amsterdam, and it was just great. They treated me so well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you have a tour coming up?
Several tours, actually. The thing I'm doing now that's a little different is we've taken the power trio, we've taken Tony Levin and Pat Mastelato's trio called Stickman, and put them together to create a 6-piece double trio that can play King Crimson music from that period. And we're going to go in May and do that show in Russia, tour around Russia. And then in June and July, we're touring around the United States as the opener for Dream Theater.
That's going to be an incredible show.
Doing that show, 45 minutes to an hour of just King Crimson material.
Right.
And it's Tony, it's me, it's Pat, the three left remaining members who play that music live. And plus we've got Julie Slick on bass and Tobias Ralph, and we've got Marcus from Austria playing. It's quite a sound. It's
Wow.
big, powerful music by King Crimson.
Right, that's great.
Yeah, and it's very nice for Dream Theater to have us along. I'm sure we'll see a lot of new people, and
Right.
I'm very excited about it.
Wonderful. Best of luck with that.
Thank you.
Adrian, thanks so much for coming in. We always love having you here.
Yeah, I love being
It's such
here.
a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.